Somebody asked, does having a diagnosis make a difference to masking, or does it not have an impact?
I'm happy to answer that one. As someone who has only recently been diagnosed, I don't think a diagnosis in itself is the helpful thing. I think knowing that you're autistic is the helpful thing. So it's about having insight into your own identity, why you process and interact with the world in the way that you do, why you experience things differently to other people, why things might be a little bit more challenging sometimes than they are to others. And I think having that insight doesn't necessarily come from a diagnosis. We all know at the moment waiting lists are huge for both adults and children. And so it can be years between realizing that you're autistic or thinking that you're autistic and having a professional confirm that. But being able to start to understand yourself, and I think often that comes in that waiting period where you're waiting to interact with a professional, starting to think about your own experiences, your own behavior, and relate that to other autistic people. That's where you start to get that insight and start to learn about your own masking or your own self-monitoring and how that manifests. So yeah, knowing that you're autistic, I think, is a huge thing in starting to unpack that for yourself.
Process you go through after diagnosis is a reevaluation of your life and a reframing of your life, and actually learning to accept, for many people, that they weren't at fault when they had perceived themselves as being at fault, and that lots of problems in their lives may have been resolved or not had happened had they received that identification earlier, and had they known and had other people known. And so there's a lot of kind of things that you have to kind of look at and pick apart and readdress. And that process itself of looking at traumatic experiences can also be traumatic. So it's quite common that people that get that diagnosis go through that period of burnout. And from the outside looking in, and hear this so often from kind of partners and parents and kind of friends and family members, that, like, well, you didn't act that way before. Now you know you're autistic, you're just acting autistically, and all of a sudden you change your whole personality and stuff like that. But actually what's happened is that that process of burnout post recognition causes your mask to fall apart. You can't sustain it anymore because it's seen itself in the mirror, which the mask is designed for you not to see it as well as anybody else to see. So once that starts to crack and fall apart, your authentic self starts to come out a little bit more. Your burnt out self will appear a little bit more. And burnout, basically, for autistic people, is being unable to sustain masking. That's really fundamentally what it is. It's not being able anymore to cover up kind of who we are or what our needs are and what our distress is and what our trauma is. So it's really important that people recognize that there isn't a sudden great personality shift, that the person's exactly the same person as they were before, but they might start stimming more, they might start being more obviously autistic in some way, because basically their mask has cracked and fallen to pieces. And it isn't that they've been deceiving you, it's just been that they've suppressed their entire life, and all of a sudden now they cannot suppress any longer.